Last time I talked about how well I was doing, having come across and learned about TMS and John Sarno, and then more modern day people in that same space, such as Dan Buglio, and how much progress I made once I sort of committed to that mindset of TMS, or the mind-body connection, and that these ailments are created because my brain, my nervous system, is sensing that I'm in danger. So it's about teaching myself safety. And I was doing really well. I was sort of coming up to Christmas 2022. Everything was sort of coming back to my normal. I was running again, I was cycling again. And I talked in the last video about all the things I stopped. So I stopped very much like John Sarno's 12 daily reminders. So all physical activity must be resumed. I did that. I was running again, cycling again, and sort of physical fixing yourself stopped. So I stopped going to physiotherapy. I stopped going to the osteopath. I still went to reformer Pilates. But when they said things like, oh, hey, are your ankles still bothering you? I'd say, no, everything's good. And I used that hour a week more as enjoyment, for pleasure, and for strengthening my body. I was doing well at the gym, again, for building strength and sort of body confidence. I stopped doing all the exercises for the potential carpal tunnel, which, as you can see, my hands are perfectly fine. And I was doing exceptionally well, and I was feeling very proud of myself. My confidence was growing. And yes, this isn't linear, and sometimes there were new ailments that would pop up, and I would deal with them with that mindset. And I can talk about those separately. I mean, there was something that popped up one day out of nowhere, which was a horrendous pain in my left hand side. And it sort of came across my ribs, and I was going into spasm, and I could only get in and out of bed by sort of rolling. But the next day, I forced myself to go for a jog. It was the most, I think I entertained a lot of people because I must have looked so odd. That's the only way I can describe it. And it was really painful. It was probably more of a shuffle. But I was trying to send a message to my body, to my brain. And within, I would say, 3 or 4 days, that had completely gone. So it's not linear, and there are setbacks. And I was doing so well. And even though I wasn't one of Dan Buglio's Pain For You clients, I spent an enormous amount of time engaging with his videos and applying so much of his wisdom. Yeah, you can see for yourself if you look at his videos. Sorry, the words are escaping me. And I thought, and he invites people to do success stories because they can be really encouraging for other people. There's been some amazing success stories on his channel. And if this is your vibe, I encourage you to have a look at those and check them out, because they're truly mind-blowingly inspiring. And there's loads of them now. So, this is a real thing. People are recovering. And I thought, I'm gonna see if he'll have me to do one. So I was coming sort of to Christmas, and I was feeling really good. And that's when things really changed for me, and sort of led up to what was to be the biggest challenge I think I'd ever faced. Well, I know the biggest challenge that I was ever to face so far in my life, but also how this year of the TMS and the change in my mindset was going to serve me so well in overcoming what was about to come down the path for me, that even now when I think about it, it still sometimes feels like it was a dream, or that it happened to somebody else. So here in the UK, the National Health Service offer free mammogram testing when you're 50 or above. So my letter came. I thought, brilliant, this is amazing, and it'll be like everything else. It'll be a breeze, because apart from the TMS and some eye surgery, and I didn't even really get childhood illnesses. My brother did, I didn't. So I thought, oh, this is great, and off I toddle to my appointment in January. I mean, it's unpleasant. well, I found it unpleasant. I've got, my breasts aren't small and they're quite muscular. So it was, I know, and I don't really, I think until you go and have one, it's hard to describe. And I can talk about that in more detail another time. But I didn't like it. Anyway, off I came home, and I thought, well, the results will come through in a week or two and everything will be great. And that wasn't the case for me. The letter came back recalling me. I'd love to be able to read that letter to you, but I've burned it. I'm not quite sure why I did that. I think it was part of my cleansing, which is another technique that I did. But the letter called me back, and it was very reassuring. It said that, I can't remember the stats, was it 4 out of 100 or what? I can't remember, but it said very, very few people actually have breast cancer, and pretty much not to worry. So I didn't. I read the letter, and they'd given me an appointment, and I'm not saying I put it to the back of my mind, and I told people about it. I talked to my colleagues at work, I talked to my line manager, and he said, oh, that's, my wife's been through this, it's a mistake, they probably just need to do it again, and you're young, you're healthy, don't worry about it. The thing is, we do go around thinking we're healthy, and to a large extent I was, but I did vape. I don't anymore, and I'd given up smoking quite a long time before that, and I wasn't a heavy smoker, but I had smoked, and I was vaping. And if you read about vaping, I shudder even thinking that I did that to myself, and I'll cover that separately. I drank alcohol. I did have a sweet tooth, so as much as I did a lot of exercise, and I thought I was eating all the healthy things, there was huge room for improvement. And we can't see what's going on inside ourselves. So as I say, I didn't really think too much of this appointment. I was very confident, or I'd always had health confidence, and I never really worried about any tests or anything. I'd take it all in my stride. And I went to that appointment on that day, and I remember very clearly my husband asking me, would you like me to come with you? Because the hospital is just like 3 or 4 miles from my home, 3 at the most, I think. And I was like, no, I'll jog it. It'll be a mistake. They probably just want to do it again. I couldn't have been more wrong. And there's a lot of that day that's still a blur to me, because things move so fast, not because I've blocked it, or maybe I have, but because things move so incredibly fast. I remember I jogged there. I remember a nurse straight away took me into a room, and I knew then that there was something about the way she looked at me, and her words were something along the lines of, we haven't made a mistake, we have found something. And I think she had to repeat it because I wasn't really taking it in, but we have found something. It's in your right breast, so this one. It's small and it's very deep, far back. So I never would have found this myself. If it had grown in later time, yes. But at that point, there was no way I could have detected this myself. And then the room starts to spin because someone's saying something to you that you have not factored into your thought processes, that it's so far from anything you've ever considered that I say, even now, I struggle to comprehend that actually happened to me. Of course, I know it happened to me. And then the next thing you know, and forgive me if some of this might not be chronologically correct, but some of it is a little bit fuzzy because it was a lot to take on board in one afternoon. But the next thing, I think I have an ultrasound, and there's the doctor doing the ultrasound, and then there's a nurse so I'm lying down on a bed, there's a nurse holding my hand, and I think there's another nurse in the room. And I just said, look, you don't need to sugarcoat, just give it to me straight. And I was expecting to say, oh, there's a 20. She said, look, from what we're seeing on this scan, we are 95% certain that you have breast cancer. And the tears come. And then the next thing you know, I'm having 5 biopsies taken, 3 from the breast, 2 from the lymph. And it's, I think that day will always be, well, my life, the course of my life changed that day, and my heart broke, it fractured, and subsequently to that, I have worked very hard to factory reset myself, rebuild myself, and put myself back together, and I'm, in many ways better than before, but it will still never take away that day fractured me in ways that I can't even still put into words, because to have somebody say that to you, you can't take it in. And I remember bursting into tears. My husband came to fetch me, and the next few days were just a blur. I remember getting very drunk on the Friday, and I was waiting for my results. I was desperately waiting for the results from the biopsy, and I think the following week they rang and said, they'd made me an appointment to go back in a week, and then they said, you don't need to come back, we've got your results, the nurse is going to call you. So I got all excited. I thought, oh my God, they've made a mistake, I don't need another appointment, it's amazing. And then they called me and they said, your results don't match what we saw on the ultrasound, your results have all come back clear. And I was like, oh my God. And they said, no, we need to rebiopsy you because we don't believe the results. So I had to go back the following week and have 8 biopsies, so 5 from the breast, another 3 from the lymph. So you imagine that a week after you've already had them done. I mean, if you've ever had biopsies, it's unpleasant. And then it was a case of waiting for the results, which then I went back the following week. But all these things were going through my head of, will I need chemo? How bad was this? Has it spread? Am I going to die? And then you think, I've got to tell people, I've got to talk about it, I need to tell work. And this is just the beginning of this amazing, devastating, but also amazing transformation journey that I've been on. Because I was lucky, I did not need chemotherapy, and it had not spread, and I'll talk about in the next time the results. But this, it all happened in the space of like 2 weeks, and it was the most enormous thing that had ever happened to me. And as I say, I still struggle now to articulate and to come to terms with how quickly my life changed like that, but also how lucky I am that it was caught very, very early, and that it was tiny, and that for me, I just needed a lumpectomy, radiotherapy. Anyway, I think that's enough for now, and I'll cover the next steps in the next video.